This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard, whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast. We have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
You're listening to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Mountain Glass Arts. For the month of January 2018, Mountain Glass is offering Golden Gate Glassworks tubing at 20% off. Just put in the coupon code Golden Gate, that's GOLDENGATE, all one word at checkout. And a little extra bonus sale they're having this month for all you Boro people out there. They're having their AccuGrind joints at 30% off. Just put in the coupon code AccuGrind, ACCUGRIND. So again, that's Golden Gate tubing at 20% off. Use the coupon code Golden Gate or also AccuGrind joints at 30% off. Just put in the coupon code AccuGrind, that's ACCUGRIND. And for all you beautiful soft glass nerds out there, they have their double helix rod 15% off sale. Just put in the coupon code DHELIX, that's DHELIX at checkout. And for any questions, comments, or concerns, just go to mountainglass.com. That's mountainglass.com. Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show, episode number 184. This is your host, Jason Michael, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Today's episode features a conversation with Takoda Madrona. You can find Takoda out there on Instagram at Takoda Madrona. I have his links in the show notes. And you can also find him on YouTube at Double Blown Podcast, or you can also just look up Takoda Madrona, and again, I'll have all the links in the show notes. And he's coming on the show today to talk about... Actually, I'm going to pick his brain about, for one, what it's like to work in the Northeast during the wintertime. I know being in Florida, we've had some cold weather, but I'm really curious on how himself and you listening, if you're working in a cold area, how you go about staying warm between your feet and your hands, and you're keeping your glass together and kilns warmed up and all that good stuff. But also the origins of his name, which I'm really curious about, if it's his actual real name. I'm pretty sure it is. But also his inspiration to his work. If you follow him on Instagram or have seen his work, he does a lot of filicello pendants and really amazing pattern work, line detail stuff that I don't have the patience for myself, but I'm always intrigued by it. And his work has this kind of a Southwest Indian kind of native look to it, and I'm really curious if that's where the influence comes from or if it's just subconscious, what have you. But it definitely has like a kind of really sacred geometry, kind of spiritual look to his work. It's pretty amazing stuff. I'm also curious on his origins and what have you. And the reason he's on the show is he has recently started a new show called Double Blown. He's calling it a podcast, but it's a YouTube channel video show. The podcast term typically resides to this type of format that's audio. Even though I'm going to be doing a once a month or so, maybe every 2 weeks, we'll see how it goes. But a little snippet YouTube Wise Guy Minute on the podcast. So that being said, he's got, I believe it's 5 episodes out now for the Double Blown show, and he covers everything from health topics. At one point, I was watching one where he was showing how to stretch properly. He was dealing with some really bad shoulder and bicep fatigue and tendonitis. So he was doing a video basically showing that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of curious about that and talk about his injury, how it's affecting him now as well. But also just, again, just talking about glass and his origins and his influence in our community. It's always fun to bring another content contributor on the show. I'm sure him and I will be doing some collaborations in the future as well. And as him and I continue our discussions, and I'm helping him get his audio set up and different equipment and things, just because we both agree that if you're going to do a show, you want to have the best content, the best sound, the best audio, video, everything. So we're going to be talking about that in the future. And again, stay tuned until after this episode, the interview's over, as I'm doing a little recap on each episode now with the artist interview, just sharing my thoughts on some bullet points and some takeaways from it as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to this chat with him, and I hope you do enjoy as well. Also, just wanted to remind you, if you have not yet subscribed to the Flow magazine, they just came out last month with their 13th annual Gallery of Women in Glass edition, which is the winter edition they do every year. And it's a quarterly magazine. If you have not yet subscribed, you can go to theflowmagazine.com and put in the coupon code WISEGUY, WYZGUY at checkout, and you'll receive 10% off your annual subscription. And they have an online version of the magazine as well, but I definitely recommend getting the hands-on paper version of it. It's chock full of tutorials, amazing articles, and write-ups, and this particular issue has 180 women featured in this issue. And a lot of times when I get magazines, I love to read the opening comments or a related article that the editor writes. And for this episode, or this issue, I keep wanting to call it an episode, this issue, Margaret Zinser Hunt is the contributing editor to this magazine issue, and she has a really awesome insight into her opening here. I want to read it to you just to kind of give you some ideas on what this particular issue is about, and also where women are in the glass world and in art in general. But I find that, as well as I agree with this, what she writes about is women have really pushed boundaries in terms of the glass scene for a long time and continue to, especially now in the functional scene. So for all you ladies out there, I definitely appreciate the trailblazing and pushing the work and giving the work a really feminine side to it, but also a fun, creative, and detailed, inspired thing. I've seen a lot of couples out there throughout my career who were both glass artists, and I always found it kind of interesting how the woman in the relationship tended to be the better artist per se, where the man was the more the shaper in a sense. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but the woman always seemed to have a little bit more detail and finesse in a sense. Per se, I'm not really sure how to say it properly without sounding like a douchebag. That's basically what I'm trying to say. But I wanted to read this opening couple paragraphs that she wrote in her little write-up here. And she writes, I'm honored to be the contributing editor for the 13th annual Women in Glass issue of The Flow. Again, this is Margaret Zinser Hunt writing this. While women in art and craft have historically been unrecognized, this oversight seems to occur less frequently in the glass world. Women have played a vital role in the history of flameworking. Their important contributions range from making beads in Italy, crafting glass ornaments in Germany, and doing the detail cutting and engraving work in the U.S. production shops in the late 1800s and early 1900s, to being prominent players in the early studio glass movement that began in the early 1960s. In the contemporary flame work, we see many significant female contributors, from sculptors to bead makers to scientific glass workers. In modern functional glass, we continue to see an increasing representation of female artists. It is with great impact that the editors of The Flow continue to their long-standing commitment to featuring the innovations and contributions of women to flameworking. The stories we tell with our flamework creations matter and deserve space. I'm grateful that the magazine has helped to create a vehicle for sharing visual stories and provide a forum for sharing technique, process, and artistry. And they have some amazing articles in this particular issue. They have a lot of tutorials, some demos. There's one with a hummingbird using a fetch ray to make that Vicky Schneider does. Just a lot of really cool stuff. And you also get some cool insights just to some of the companies out there that you may not know about that sell work, and just a lot of cool stuff. But it's incredible to see the stuff in here. I mean, it's inspiring and mind-blowing. So I appreciate The Flow for doing this particular issue. And definitely get your hands on this particular one and just get a subscription. And again, just go to theflowmagazine.com, use the promo code WISEGUY, WYZGUY, and you'll receive 10% off your annual subscription for that. Also, a couple things too, a little housekeeping here. Wanted to remember to let you guys know that we do now have a Patreon page if you would like to help financially contribute to the show and become what I'm calling you a wise ass for joining the community. All you have to do is just follow the Patreon link down below in the show notes, and for as little as $1 a month, you can join an exclusive group that are helping grow the show. All proceeds go directly back into the show's budget, which will help me to make the show even better with upgraded equipment, offset current expenses, and future travel for trade shows and events that I'll be able to go and cover and give you a first-person perspective of the ins and outs of the current trade show scene. Soon there'll be an exclusive bonus for any wise ass that becomes a contributor if you are contributing $5 a month or more, and that's going to be video tutorials. I'm going to have a little pin made as well, so I'm pretty excited to continue to grow this show as we are now into Season 4. This is Episode 2 of Season 4, but it's Episode 184 in general. Super excited about it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show, whether you're using iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. Also can find the show on iHeartRadio, and I'm still waiting to get onto Spotify, so you can also listen to the show there, no matter what phone you have. And for those who have a Droid, Stitcher is one of the apps you can use, and you can just search for the show in there and subscribe to it. Also, help us leave a review as well. Any kind of review that you leave shows iTunes that the show is being listened to. They don't really pay attention too much to the downloads. It's more on the activity on the show itself regarding to the people that leave comments and stuff. So any kind of comment helps the show get more exposure, which then exposes us and our community to a broader range of people that may not know what we're all about. And we want to share this amazing community as much as possible. And so I'm definitely excited for everything going on here. I got a lot of amazing feedback and response from the last episode with JD Mablesden and his journey and what he's been going through and the state of affairs in the industry with the trade shows. And he always gives it a really good, solid perspective that I share, and a lot of people that have reached out to me have the same perspective. So there's definitely a lot of things changing in the community. It's just depending on which direction that you go and what wave you're going to ride will depend on success and failure. So make sure that you're paying attention to all things that are going on. And, a lot of things we talked about in the last episode was creating work for yourself, not creating work necessarily for your audience or for your likes or your follows and that kind of stuff. Really just as a perspective and a voice to create work for yourself. Even though you do production, obviously production is a little different, but when it comes into actually creating your art for yourself and getting your voice out there, it's so important to make work that speaks to you. And if somebody out there doesn't like it, well, then that means it's not for them. So, don't take negativity to heart per se. I know it's easier said than done, but really to avoid making artwork for likes and hearts and shares and that kind of stuff, it's important to kind of stay away from that whole mindset. Especially when you're a newbie in a sense. I know it's easy for myself, I've been doing this for almost 19 years, to get just as wrapped up in the situation. So, yeah. And I have a little story I'm going to be sharing on my Instagram that I had with a guest at work this weekend that really hit home with me. And just brought awareness, even more so, the struggle that our veterans are going through, those that have been in battle and combat. Actually, I'm just going to tell you about it right now, just while I got you on here. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but so this past weekend I had a guest who was one of our fellow cast members. Last year she was in town brought her daughter and grandson in town because the woman who's the cast member, her husband had passed away, and to celebrate his life and to kind of get away from the realities of life, they came to Epcot for the day to kind of just get away. And she had asked if I could make a custom piece for her grandson, and I was like, yeah, sure. So I made this little dragon for him. Well, the dragon I was going to make was going to take about an hour, is about what I quoted, and they wanted to come back and actually watch me make it. So they had their dinner reservations. They came back, and we had 3 hours left in the day. So they got back to the shop about 6. I closed at 9. And literally him and his mom sat there and watched me make it for 3 hours. And I had a pair of glasses I let him borrow, so him and his mom were taking turns wearing them and stuff to help save his eyeballs. But the impact that I made on this kid, who I didn't even really know who he was, until we got to know each other from him hanging out. But I did a little drawing for him of the piece I was going to make ahead of time to get his approval, etc. And his grandmother came back this last weekend and was sharing with me that how much he loved the dragon, and that the drawing I made him, he also framed and has it up on his wall next to the dragon that I made, which I thought was amazing. And she shared the story that last year his father had committed suicide, who was in the Air Force, and he was dealing with severe PTSD from the war. And so basically this little kid lost his father, and she was asking me if there's anything I can make to, as something that could symbolize the loss and to help with that. I guess his battalion that he was in, had a crab for their symbol. And so we have some crabs that we make, and one of our artists, Jerry Beasley, some of you may know who he is, he makes these pretty badass crabs. So she bought one of the crabs, but also asked if I can make him a little custom piece. He liked sea life, so I was like, hey, how about a shark? So I'm going through the process trying to think about, after she told me the story, and I have a 10-year-old, so for myself, and having shared my story of my attempted suicide, it really hit me hard and was heavy on my heart all day. It's just the impact that it hit me, and I wanted to make sure I did something special, but it also kind of gave me some different perspectives on those out there that are struggling still with depression and PTSD and what have you. So I was trying to think of something I can make special for this little boy, and so I made him a little hammerhead And then one of my pieces I make, a manatee scene, has the base has 3 circles that look like the Mickey icon. It's basically my hidden Mickey base. So I wanted to include a little Disney in there. So I made the base with the 3 little circles with the shark on the bigger circle. And then I had these 2 smaller circles, which are like the Mickey ears with nothing on them. And I'm like, okay, what can I do and put on here? And because of the whole crab representation for his father, I made the tiniest little small crab that was in proportion to the shark, and put him on a little rock and had his claws up, like kind of like a protection type of thing. And I was telling the story to my family last night about this whole thing, and I couldn't even get through the story. I was just like, emotionally, it was heavy on me, and I was just kind of lost it. My son was with me too, so it was even heavier. And I guess the whole point of this is, for one, we got to remember our veterans out there. Anything we could do to help them and support them and let them know that they are loved and we're thankful for their sacrifices. I don't agree with war and all the politics and stuff, but they're human beings that have some serious issues that we all need to somehow find a way to reach out to these folks and help. I don't know what we can do as a glass community, but there's got to be something we can do in a sense. I know there's like a daily push-up thing going on. People are doing to support that. I think it's like 40. I want to say it's 40 veterans a day commit suicide, or it's some crazy number like that. But anyways, that being said, I just wanted to share this with you just because, as an artist, and I'm sure yourself, there's points in your career where you can have such an impact on somebody with your work that you don't really realize the impact you have until maybe they come back and talk to you a couple years later, or immediately. And I've shared some other stories on here too of other guests or people who I've made stuff for. So I guess that being said, just when you're making custom work for your people or whoever it is that you're making your stuff for, just think of the perspective that they're going to have when they get your work. Make sure what you're making for them is from your heart and isn't just a rushed piece. There's some thought and insight going into it, because it was definitely something that I would have been crushed if it would have cracked. Through the process, and thank God it didn't. And she received it the next day. I wasn't there when she picked it up, but I know it's going to have a lasting impact, which is what my whole point of this is that the glass that we make for people potentially is going to have a lifelong, lasting impact as long as it doesn't get broken or whatever. And even if those that have things that get broken, they still tend to hold on to these little things. So, anyways, I don't know. That's just my little story. It's just something I just been wanting to share, and it's definitely something that just made me aware, of other things out there, and just life is so precious. It's just such a crazy thing just to think about. So, anyways, I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but I wanted to share that story with you. And just when you're on the torch and you're making things again, it's an amazing opportunity that we have to do what we do every day. Some days suck, some days are fucking amazing, but just remember that what you're making is going to be in somebody's hands that could potentially have a lifelong impact on them. So, on that note, I'm going to get on the phone here and get my chit-chat in with Takoda Madrona. And again, you guys can find him on the Instagrams at Takoda Madrona. I'll have all the links in the show notes as well for his podcast or his YouTube show, quote-unquote. And then again, stay tuned until after the show. I will be doing a little after-the-show breakdown of some bullet points and topics I found to be insightful that I wanted to share. And until next time, thanks again for tuning in. You can go to, hopefully the website will be up. I'm still dealing with some website issues with GoDaddy, but hopefully we'll be getting those taken care of. Actually, I need to give a huge shout out real quick to Pimp Ship Glass. He goes by on Instagram. He came into this Epcot this weekend, and we were flip-flapping. He was actually watching me make the shark for this piece. And his name's Dylan. He's a really young, he's a young artist, but he's also a super cool dude, based out of Pensacola area. And he does web development and is going to help me, potentially help me maintain and run this website, because I'm pretty technologically savvy, but when it comes to code and website stuff, it's all Chinese to me. I have no fucking clue. So, so in the meantime, this episode will be available at wiseguymedia.com/184. And hopefully the website will be up soon, so you guys can go on there and check it out, or just again listen to on your phones, whatever. So there you go. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe, leave reviews, tell your friends about the show, and stay warm out there if you're out in the cold, and hydrated, and all that fun stuff. And happy melting. And until next time, have a wise day. Love you so much. Enjoy this episode with Takoda Madrona. See you. Hey, Takoda, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. It's good to have you on here. I've been following your career for quite a while now, and I've always appreciated your intricacies and details in your line work. Something I have zero patience for, so it's something I appreciate seeing being done, and at the level of expertise in a sense that you're doing yours as well, and the influence that you have in the community, and as well as your new online YouTube podcasty show called Double Blown, which I want to talk about too. Which I'm pretty pumped to see another person coming into this educational space. And not just doing educational videos per se on just like a technique, but you're actually dropping some knowledge, which I think is really important. I've been watching them, and I definitely appreciate what you're going through, learning this process, not only on how to communicate, but also just the production side of things. Shit ain't easy. So I definitely got to say thanks for doing what you're doing right now.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just really thrilled to be on your show, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, not a problem, man. So before I get too sidetracked here, if you want to start us off by giving us your superhero origin story and how you were introduced into the flame.
Yeah, I was really young. I was still in high school, and I was about 15, and I took a vacation. I was living in Hawaii, and I took a vacation back where I was born, which is Burlington, Vermont, and to visit my brother. And I kind of just saw some glassblowers working in the town that my brother lived in Burlington. And when I went back to Hawaii, my friend kind of just advised me, like he thought, I guess, he looked at me as an artist of some sort, and he thought, "Hey, man, like you could do that. Like I bet you could do that, and you would have a lot of fun." And he was like my best friend at the time, so I would say like he kind of, interestingly enough, like he pushed me that direction. Was like, I think you should really do that. And I actually just went on Google and looked online to see what I could find and how I could start glassblowing. And interestingly enough, the place that I saw the glassblowers originally was offering lessons. And I worked out with my parents that if I could figure out a way to graduate high school or take college classes in Burlington, Vermont, then they would allow me to go back to Burlington, Vermont to go learn how to blow glass. So I actually was taking online courses for high school and going to the Community College of Vermont when I was 16 and moved away from Hawaii to go to Vermont, and then started taking glassblowing classes at the school in town. They It's just like a brand new little glassblowing school, and I ended up being their first graduate ever
Huh.
from their school. And then about a year late, and then after that, I took the lessons for about a month and 2 months, maybe 2 months, but it was what it was 20 hours. And I would do, I was just going every day if I could. As long as that took me. And then I had to go back to Hawaii to I finished out some courses, some semesters that I needed to do in Burlington, but then I went back to Hawaii to actually pick up my diploma and because I had to physically be in the state to pick up my diploma
Oh,
for some
interesting.
reason.
Yeah.
So I went back to Hawaii for a while. I was actually about 8 months, and then I came back to Vermont, but I didn't immediately, hop back on the torch. It wasn't really a career for me at that point. It was really just like I kind of did it for a while and had a lot of fun with it. Then I got a job to kind of prove to myself I could get a job, and I was going to college. And then I eventually decided it was a busser job, so I was a busser. So I decided I didn't want to be a busser, and I thought that I could possibly work in the shop that I once upon a time ago took classes for glass blowing. And when I went in there and I asked them for a job, they said that they were looking for glass blowers, and so they took me on as a glass blower, even though I just had basically the 20 hours of experience that I had had. Um, and then from there, basically I rented space from them $30 a day and then sold them glass. So I got to use their equipment and everything, and their torch and tools and everything, and gas, and work $30, for $30 a day. And then eventually that translated into uh, a more hourly job. But for and then sorry, I'm mumbling.
That's all right.
Uh, Eventually, it became more of an hourly job, which then led to other things like me teaching. So the teacher that I once had left the school. So then I eventually, about a year in, and started working hourly for them. I started teaching for them as well. And then, I started repairing glass as well. So people would bring in broken pieces and I would repair their glass, and as well as doing custom work. So, jobs and work around what gathered, and I just started working for them, and I worked for them for about 5 years as I built my skills up through doing those jobs basically. And I was lucky enough that basically Burlington, Vermont has a yearly competition. So I got to see a lot of glassblowers come in and see them work, as well as a lot of glassblowers live here.
Hmm.
So a lot of glassblowers live in Vermont. So I was lucky enough to actually make a large group of friends that all did what I did, and we all kind of taught each other for years,
Nice.
and it was really cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
Hell yeah. So the first 20 hours that you were doing it, like what was some of the stuff you were learning in terms of the classes you were
Yeah,
taking?
so yeah, in those classes, basically, I had like there were two guys there at the time that were teaching. So it was Dylan Davis and a guy named Moondog, which I don't believe either of them are still glassblowing. Dylan Davis is not, but Dylan Davis was my teacher, and they were both taught in very different ways. So they like both tried to kind of teach me, but one of them was my teacher, which was Dylan Davis. And Dylan taught me by teaching me a different thing every day. So one day we learned how to make, the first day was just kind of introduction to the flame, and we tried to make a pipe, and did our best, and he helped me go through it, and together we made a pipe. Next day, we made a pipe, then we switched it up and did a more complicated pipe. But then we started the next day we did like a steamroller, and then the next day we did a bubbler, and then the next day we did something else that was similar, but then he would add, we'd add in color or something like that, in some sort of way, and he'd teach me some technique that he did. So I learned a kind of interesting way of doing that, and it was actually 40 hours in total, because I would do an hour with him and then an hour by myself.
Okay.
So I did about 40 hours in total in that time. But it was all kind of like together, and so I would watch him. But the first things that I did, the first things that I made were we took blow tube, what we would consider nowadays blow tube, or 12 by 2.2 tubing, and then we'd fume it with silver fuming, and then we would blow up the end as a ball, and we'd make a pipe out of that.
Okay. Yep.
So we would make a fume pipe for our first one. We started with 12 by 2.2, and then we moved up to making them larger out of 19 by 3.2. So this is all 19 millimeter by 3.2 millimeter. Everything's in millimeter. And then from there, we started pulling the neck and tapering the neck, and moving forward with little things like that. So a lot of it was fume spoons in the beginning on fume work. And then we started adding um, like color rod as dots, because we started learning a little bit of honeycomb work as well with the fuming. So we started doing dots, clear dots on the fuming. So he taught me the same thing but with color, and we did some color dots. And then he taught me how to drop a down stem and do a push bowl bubbler, because back then when I was like 16, we weren't making rigs or carb caps or anything, or
Right.
dabbers. So we learned how to do, we dropped a down stem and did push bowl bubblers. We started with more of a hammer style, and he taught me how to do a fusion to fuse those two pieces of glass together, the water chamber of the push bub and the mouthpiece. And then we started doing stand-up bubblers, and just taught me all different kinds of shapes and sizes as far as that. I actually don't think we did a stand-up bubbler together. We actually only did a hammer bubbler together. I learned a stand-up bubbler on my own, but it was pretty much, the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so, and then, towards later on, I was pushing towards making bongs and steamrollers and things like that, as a lot of students are. And he did his best just to, let me, mess around, and he showed me as much as he could as far as different techniques and ways to work around that. But I was working like a Lynx torch, which is really small, and trying to make a bong, which was like really difficult. And I still have all that stuff, like the scraps. So it was a fun time. And but yeah, I started with some fume spoons and moved on to a little bit of color work, just adding the color, basically just dotting it on, and not too much stringer work or anything, just full rods. And then from there, and he showed me frit work. So we would add frit to the inside of tubes, so inside frit work. And that was once we bumped up from the 19 millimeter, we moved to the 26 millimeter tubing. And the 26 millimeter tubing we would fill with frit, or we would make what later on was called the Dylan spoon, because Dylan no longer worked there, but it became a production line piece for the store that I worked at.
Oh, interesting.
For in the future. So
right.
This spoon that he taught me, it was just 26 by millimeter can. May have gone a little bit bigger. He normally worked a little bit bigger, I think 32. But we would open that up like a bell and fume the inside, and then we would do 4 little stripes of 3 millimeter clear, and then we would melt that down and spin it, and it creates a really nice fumed spun inside out work type design on the in the inside of the pipe.
Hell yeah.
So we called that the Dylan spoon, just a simple fume and striped on the inside out work fume spoon. And we called that the Dylan spoon. So that later on, and that's what he taught me, and that was kind of towards the end of my lessons. And that was what he did, and what we called his bread and butter, or what glassblowers call their bread and butter, which is the thing that you can make over and over and over again, a whole bunch of it, and it makes money. It sells.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, it sounds like it's a good progression that you had, because it's, you're not just jumping into making rigs, you're learning the process. Because like when I teach myself, I start off with 12 mil, make a ball of glass and then blow it out into an even walled hollow shape. Because at that point, like when I was first myself getting into it, like we'd use 12 mil for slides. So I learned a lot myself early on, being mostly self-taught, how to make a nice even walled ball sphere-wise by blowing out some 12 mil and then popping a hole and pushing a bowl, but making sure it was like big enough so when I pushed my bowl, it wasn't touching the walls inside the actual ball itself. Which took me hundreds of those things to fucking to figure out the process without always cracking things, or they would crack like the next day or whatever. But yeah, man. So I'm glad you're sharing that, because it's so important to have that foundation of progression, not just jumping in and trying to make the biggest, baddest thing, but also working on a small torch. Because like myself, I started on a minor bench burner, and in terms of myself, when I first started doing glass, I was on a national 3A. And but then I got my own torch, which was a little minor bench burner, and I was making spoons and shit. But I eventually started making bubblers on it, and little 2-piece dry spoons and Sherlocks and stuff. And it was a pain in the ass trying to use that little bit of heat for that much tubing. But I made it work for the time being until I was able to buy my Carlisle. And it's just you got to do what you got to do early on to save up the money to then upgrade your equipment by learning little tiny things and eventually getting into bigger things. So it's fun. And I know myself, I made plenty of those Dylan spoons as well. Yeah. That's good shit. Yeah, it's interesting though to see like that stuff is still around, still being made these days, which is good, because there's
a lot of money in it.
Yeah, and it keeps the shops from going out and buying the import shit instead,
Yeah.
all these newbies can start making that stuff. The China killers per se. It's good shit. So at what point in time in your career did you start doing your line work and getting more into more of your detailed, intricate stuff?
That actually probably wasn't until about 2 or 3 years in, probably like 3 years in. For the most part, I was mainly focusing a lot of energy on repairs and sculptural work for like production line pipes and things
Hmm.
for the store, and repairing glass along with teaching lessons. So a lot of my time went towards teaching lessons and doing repairs. And I mean, for the first year, it was really just the fundamentals, like just learning how to, make a sellable pipe,
Hmm.
and then being able to produce multiple of them that look the same, and then doing the same thing with bubblers and, all those things. And along those lines, I made some of the stuff I look back on, like I love the most. I made some whales. I made a series of whale pipes and snake pipes, and yeah, that was like a couple years before Instagram, so like I don't even have those pictures up and everything. But I have I made, production line pipes, and, as I just mentioned, a couple like animals and such, in the beginning when I was just like trying to learn production and being able to make the same thing over and over again. And then it became more like repairs lessons after I started teaching. But then I uh, eventually eventually I got to pendant. Instagram became popular. I got myself an Instagram, and pendants became more popular. And uh, I made a reticello and a filicello my first tries, and they got like a lot of love on Instagram. And I just kept going with those because they got so much love from everybody. And I really enjoyed making them. They were like they're one of the more difficult things.
Yeah.
Everything is really difficult, to make look right. Like, I guess I say like honeycombs, like the process in itself sounds pretty similar, or simple fume dots, just dot 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 dot. But to get it just right is really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I guess that's kind of where I fell with like filicellos and reticellos. Like, getting it just right was like so difficult, and I guess that's what attracted me to it. And I started doing it not till like 3 years into glass blowing, so maybe 3.5, 4 years ago.
Crazy. Yeah, well, it's fun though when you do get the love like that on the social media. It's like you're not making things for the love, but you're making things because that's what people want to buy from you in a sense. And you found
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
my owls were the same way. Like early on, that's what got my whole Wise Guy brand going. Was some lady at work one day over at Epcot asked if I could make a small owl, so I did, and I posted it on Instagram. And people loved it, but they asked if I could make a functional one, and I never had made an owl before like that. So I made one, and then the love continued, the same thing. And the next thing I know, I've got like customers that were sending me drawings of the pieces they were buying off of me, and this one kid sent me a logo or an image actually that ended up becoming my logo, which I use now. And then the brand started, and everything else. So it's kind of fun to see where something like that starts, and then it just kind of snowballs, and you can grasp onto it and just constantly keep improving it. And obviously with your technique, you've obviously been trying to not necessarily master it, but as close as possible in terms of mastering something.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think too by getting a specific direction from your tribe in a sense, it helps you to stay focused on just one tech or one specific area, because it's I'm sure like yourself, I've attempted and tried thousands of techniques over the years, and a lot of them resonated with me and a lot of them didn't, and the ones that did I still do to this day. But even the ones that did, I don't necessarily have down to a science yet, and I still want to go back and revisit those, like the honeycombs. Like doing a really nice silver fume implosion honeycomb has been one of those things that I've just never really figured out, except for if I use like some purple passion or some color that I knew was going to reduce to look like it was a fumed honeycomb.
Yeah, yeah, no, exact, yeah, totally. I yeah.
But like the honeycombs, there's nothing worse than being almost done with the honeycomb and having one dot touch another dot, and it just fucks the
Yes,
entire
the
thing up.
entire thing up. It sounds so simple, but it's extremely difficult to
It's
get
a
just right.
kick in the balls, man. And which again is why I appreciate your work, because I know like I've done filicellos and line work before, and it's just it came out looking nice, but there was times I would just get so frustrated with it because I knew I had orders waiting for me, and here I am. I felt like I was wasting my time, and I look back on it now, and I know it wasn't, because I was learning, the process. Which it's nothing drives me crazier than hearing people say, "Oh, I'm just wasting my time, I'm wasting material," but really you're not. You're you're investing in yourself by throwing that piece in the garbage and doing it again, and doing it again, and
Yeah,
doing it again.
yeah. I mean, I I really recommend people like finding somebody that has done what you are trying to attempt before, or something, like
Hmm.
trying to find a teacher, because I spent so much time trying to figure out like you can with a teacher you can figure out a month's worth of trial and error in an hour,
Yeah. Yep.
and then you're so much farther forward. And but because the struggle you're talking about of like over and over again, like when you're self-taught and you are teaching yourself, it is like you said, you do it 1,000 times and you can't figure it out until you get it, and then you're like, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Then you have to get good at that,
Yeah. Exactly.
after you even figure it out. It is definitely like you have to figure it out yourself, but I do totally recommend finding somebody that can show you the ropes.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
exponentially can help.
Yeah, and it's also why classes and people that teach charge what they charge, because you're paying for that time that they spent to learn that process, the years and years
Oh
and
yeah,
years and years of dedication. You're paying to get the shortcut in a sense.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like either you
So,
can
so
spend the time and spend the money doing it yourself, or go spend the money on someone else to show you. It's like having a mentor in a sense.
yeah, somebody posted something and said, um, I'm now blanking. I apologize. Of course.
It's okay. It'll come
Uh,
back to you, and you'll shout it out.
yeah, of course.
I do it all the time, dude. I was interviewing for another podcast last night, and I was talking about the shops on Main Street at Magic Kingdom, and I couldn't think of the fucking store across the street from our shop. And it's like this one big long strip of stores, and I kept referring to it. I referred to it probably 6 or 7 times, and then like halfway in the talk, it was like, it's the Emporium. It just like out of nowhere, and they knew what I was talking about, but it was one of those things. It's like 4 in the morning, and all of a sudden you remember what the fuck you were trying to remember earlier in the day.
Yeah, yeah,
It drives me crazy. But anyways, but yeah, it's definitely important. It's to understand that you're paying for that knowledge.
yeah. I remember what I was gonna say. They posted up that when you're buying somebody's piece and it's worth some odd dollars, 500,000 or whatever, you're and they may have spent so and so time on it, 5 hours or whatever. You're you're not paying for the time that they took to make that piece. You're also paying for the thousands of hours that they've spent before that trying to figure out how to make that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I don't remember exactly how it was said, but it's like, yeah, you're not paying for the artist's time exactly. You're also paying for the fact that they figured out how to do this.
Yeah, yeah. Because like I work all the time. I'm always asked like how long it takes me to make something specifically, and I'll tell them 15, 20 minutes, and then I go back and I say, well, actually, it's like 19 years and 15 minutes it took me to
Yeah,
make that piece.
yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's what it
Exactly.
comes down to. So how long total have you been on the torch now?
I guess it would be about 7 years now. Well, yeah, yeah, just about. Yeah, about 7 years now.
Okay. Hell yeah. So when you were in Hawaii, did you run into like the glass guys out there at all?
No, they're really like not at all. I didn't like it. I guess back then they weren't on Google, because I could not find anyone in on Oahu. I lived on Oahu,
Okay.
and I could not find anybody. Like it was, I mean, it was probably like not that good at searching, and the internet 15 how long ago was that? 10 years ago
Hmm.
wasn't what it is today.
You're right. Right.
Even back then, everybody wasn't on the line, especially some, or at least that easily found without the exact right keywords.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
You
interesting
know,
too because like I've had Nathan Belmont and Jupiter Nielsen both on the show and talked because they both are out of Hawaii out there, and it's trying to find out like living on an island that's more or less secluded from everything else, especially from like the pipe scene in a sense. Like if they felt like it kind of stunted their growth of not having the exposure to other artists that are in the functional scene per se. Because like Jupiter, the dude's fucking amazing sculptor. Realism, the stuff he's making is just mind blowing. But he said he struggled with the pipes because he really didn't have anybody to go under to learn the process in a sense. So by you getting out of Hawaii and going to Vermont where there's a glass scene, it gave you like kind of the kickstart to have that instead of being stuck in Hawaii trying to figure it out on your own.
yeah, yeah. No, it definitely, without a scene, I don't know how I would have done it. You know, I mean, there's just, it would have taken me so much longer.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's too. It's like the difference of working by yourself or working in a studio with other glassblowers. You may not all talk to each other all the time and share knowledge, but there's definitely the knowledge is there, and you can look over your shoulder or over their shoulder or whatever to help pick up little tips and tricks here and there, or just have the artist and the energy and the influence that's going on in the studio itself.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exponentially more helpful to have people around,
Yeah,
always,
yeah,
in
yeah.
anything, not just glass blowing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. So early on when you were teaching, like what were you teaching yourself? Like, were you trying to like share the stuff, like the process, the progression of way you learned the same way that you were teaching it, like in a sense?
Yeah, I tried to basically replicate my old teacher's way of doing it, but I actually, well, not actually at all. I shouldn't say that. I like to say that I kept the same idea, but not, but I couldn't really do that. Basically, what he did, he wasn't really supposed to do, I guess, because the whole like goal of we had like two lesson packages, beginner and advanced. There actually was three. There was beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And then I took the course, and I did the beginner and intermediate, and they said you don't need to and shouldn't take the advanced course. You can make a sellable pipe already, so anything from now on is just you're gonna be learning basically of everything, and there's so they were like, you don't need to take the advanced course. We're actually just going to cut that one out and not have that, and we're just going to have two courses for now on, and then you're our first graduate basically is what happened.
Huh.
And so I so I graduated with that, and when I started teaching there was only two things where there was eventually, like way later on, let's say 4 years later, they reintroduced the advanced course. I, but that's besides the point.
Right, right.
But there were two courses, 10 lessons apiece.
Okay.
So within the first 10 lessons, you're supposed to basically make a fume pipe by yourself. Like you're supposed to be able to make a fume pipe by yourself. So you had to construct, they basically left it up to me to construct a lesson plan that would allow a student to successfully make a fume spoon by a functional fume spoon by the end of 10 lessons. But I realized very quickly I could get a student to do that within two, by himself.
Nice.
Like, first day he could do it. I could get him to do it by just showing him how to do it. But like 2 hours by yourself and 2 hours with me, for sure, I bet you could, most of them could do it, like make a fume spoon on their own. I would say, 50% of them, but like, so I really needed to like expand that. So I kind of broke it down so that by the end of it, we constructed, deconstructed, and reconstructed, you know, every single from fume spoon to frit spoon to inside out spoon. All of that and all the differences with them, because sometimes you in the beginning you won't taper the mouth, the neck, and there's tons of things. When you're melting down frit, you've got to treat the mouthpiece a lot differently. You can get away with not really doing so much work with the mouthpiece in the beginning when you're just working with fume, because you're just working with clear glass and fume. But then once you're working with some frit and inside out work, there's a lot more work that goes into that. So I'd get them, my goal was trying to get them to be able to successfully make at least a frit pipe by the end of the 10 lessons by themselves.
Nice.
26 millimeter. So, but all I had to really do is make sure that they could make a pipe by the end of the 10 lessons. And then the next 10 lessons, I would try to get them to make a bubbler. We would reapproach all the stuff we learned by, going bigger and making, the mouthpiece and the functional bit, learning how to drop the down stem. We do it all clear first and move on to other things. And sometimes people would want to learn, something very specific. So I would leave, out of the 10 lessons, I'd give them 2 lessons to be like, oh, you want to learn how to make a carb cap? Oh, you want to make, a plug for your ear, or you want to make a dabber? I'd let them choose sometimes. So that allowed them to experiment in ways that weren't so grounded and would retain the whole Dylan Davis way of teaching. It would allow them to do what they wanted to do. And I would always try, but like the last lesson, it was always like, what would you really love to do? Like, what's the coolest thing that you would like to do out of all, and I'd work with them and we'd develop something cool and do it.
Nice.
But because that was kind of what we did with what Dylan did for me, is that my last lesson, we did a full colored bubbler, and I still have it today. And it kind of looks like I have Millie chips all over it, because we dotted with this Momka color that basically you can use as a Millie chip, like a flower Millie chip.
Yep.
So that was really cool. I still have that today. And it took way longer than the lesson was supposed to, but it was this whole thing. It was like, today we're just going to do whatever you want. We're going to make the coolest thing that we can make, and I'm going to work with you, and you're going to do it. And we did, and it was awesome. So I tried to retain that too. So yeah, that was basically teaching.
Yeah. Well, it's cool though, man. I like the idea of the free time like that, or the kind of expand your horizons even more so, to kind of push the possibilities in a sense, I guess.
Yeah. We also had this, just like with me, we had an hour after working with me. So you'd work with me for an hour, and we'd do back to back. Like with Dylan, which was interesting, is he really just kind of showed me for an hour how to do stuff, and then I worked for myself in an hour. But like I didn't. But that was because I had my ALS right after the lesson.
Okay. So
he focused more time in showing me. Like sometimes he'd have me on the torch too, for sure. But we didn't both make a piece. Like in that time, I would make my piece in the ALS. But when I taught in our lesson, like the hour lesson, I make a piece and they'd make a piece during that hour, and then they'd have an hour to experiment and do whatever they want, and basically try to, I would say, replicate what we just did, by yourself. Some of them would, take some of the time to experiment and do whatever they wanted. But, so we would do that. And those were called ALS hours, or ASL, ALS, not ASL, that's American Sign Language, but ALS hours. So they would do hours by themselves, and that would allow them to have a lot of time to experiment as well. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because everybody learns a little bit differently, and it's like these online courses I'm doing. I have both ways of learning, by drawing things onto a whiteboard, breaking things down geometrically, and then I have like the video lesson as well, to watch the process and the technique. But then I'm going to have my students also, they're going to make a piece on a video chat with me, so I can kind of talk them through any issues they might be coming up with. So it's everybody has, some people like to be shown things, some people like to figure it out themselves, and I think the process of showing somebody, having them do it so you can watch them, and then leaving them by themselves is the way to go, because you kind of get all the best of both worlds in there in the same time, compared to, like you're saying, just he shows you and then you're on your own for an hour. It's like it's not always
Yeah.
easy because
You get an hour of me right over your shoulder to ask questions and
yeah.
help you, even like grab the glass in an emergency or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to go on your own and like be on your own, which I think is where most of the learning comes.
Yeah.
Being on your own.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say something. I totally blanked. Sorry. That's why I said, but I totally blanked again.
But it's all good. But I like that, like you're saying that too, by standing behind them, because I do the same thing. Like I tell my students, like, don't be surprised if I grab your arm or put you in a certain position, because it's all about body mechanics too. Besides just making things, you got to understand gravity, keeping your arms and elbows tight to your sides. Like there's certain things you got to really body mechanic wise know to not only to make it so you can work longer, but also to make it so you're not going to be you're going to let gravity do its thing. It's just so many nuances.
I'd always tell my students put their arms like up like a T-Rex.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
put their hands forward. I had this whole routine. Actually, my episode 5 of Double Blown is about tendonitis and how I've been dealing with tendonitis, and I actually discuss a lot of about what you were just saying of body mechanics and how you need to relax yourself while you're working. Otherwise, you're going to do some real damage to yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, so speaking of Double Blown, dude, I definitely, I know you have done, before you started doing your show, you have done a lot of other like tutorial videos and stuff on your YouTube. So at what point in time, like what spawned your interest, a couple of years ago per se, or however long ago it was you started doing your YouTube channel? Like what was kind of getting you going with that?
Well, my YouTube channel basically, like, I don't really know why I made that YouTube channel I think before I even glass blew, but I made a YouTube channel and started posting up kind of like my own stuff. Like I had a video of my gerbil once, but because I used to have a gerbil and he would climb out of the cage and then climb back into the cage by himself, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah, it is.
But that's how my YouTube channel really started. But I guess as far as like what made me want to like post up my glass blowing videos, because I started doing how-to videos much later on, like years later, and I did a couple how-to videos. That's really just because like I said, I was lucky enough to grow up in, or come up, not grow up, but grow up. I started when I was very young, so you could classify it as that, but come up in an area where there are so many people to learn from. And I know that, historically glass blowing isn't exactly the thing that is is the most open to people. Like it's been very closed off from general society, as 3,000 years ago, if you told people how to glass blow, you'd be killed.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been the most open thing. So basically it's just like people showed me a lot of stuff and I learned something that a lot of people were interested in at that time. Like there are now a bunch of videos and tutorials on so much. When I was coming up, there was nothing, like absolutely nothing. I remember because Revere wasn't even doing his videos. When I was 16, I don't think Revere was doing any videos. So when I remember Googling glass blowing or YouTubing, searching on YouTube glass blowing, and the only two videos I found were black and white videos, and the video of a soft glass blower making a horse, which I think a lot of people have seen. So but those were like literally the only two videos I could find. It was funny, and but then all of a sudden there's a huge explosion, and I guess at that time there wasn't, like, when I made my video there already was Revere and a lot of videos, but I hadn't actually seen those. And at that time I just hadn't seen them for some reason because I wasn't really on top of it, and it was more just dealing with my community. And I got on the Instagram wagon a little late. A couple of my friends had Instagram for a year or two before I did. So I just wasn't on top of it, but I came out with the how to make a Filicello video actually shortly after Revere and Yushin made theirs. But that was weird. So, but I made mine, and I made mine because a lot of people just had so many questions, and I wanted people to know what I was doing because, I also, there's this really awesome guy named Hickory. He's a glass blower, and he actually will like show people his like exactly how he does his stuff, all of his Hickory stuff, and he shows the tubing and exactly how he vac stacks it, and everything. He'll show you everything, and he's basically just like, yeah, you could make it too, but like good luck doing exactly what I do.
All right.
Like it's like, but and I would like to see you do it. That'd be, it's cool. Or take what I've made and make your own thing. Like make a different tree, or make something completely different. There's so many things that you can do with that technique that he uses to
Mm-hmm.
make that his tubing. So yeah, I just, seeing other people do it, I guess, too. Like Hickory just openly showing how he does what he does was really cool. And it's like, I want these people to know this. Somebody else showed me, and they didn't really show, I had to build off of a reticello, basically. And to this day, people say I don't make a filicello. I've made filicellos the same way that Yushin makes filicellos, and a lot of other artists make filicellos. But if you look at our how-to videos, Yushin's versus mine, they're very, very different. We make our stuff very different. So like a lot of people like reticello can be made in so many different ways too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really, it was like showing people my way of doing it. It was like, this is how I figured it out.
Well, that's why I think it's
I wasn't told how to do this. Like I had a basic understanding that two sets of lines need to cross each other,
right.
and then I built from that.
Yeah, yeah. Then that's why I think it's so much fun with the glass community. Is like there's so many different ways to get from A to Z. It's just how do you do it? What works best for you? It isn't just if it works for you, Sheen, it works for you, Sheen, but it may not work for you in a sense. And you can watch a video and try to copy it, but you also got to have a foundation to understand your medium first before you can even think about doing anything like that, making whatever it is that you want to copy off of YouTube. So, and I think that's what's important for people that are getting started, to get a lesson or two or five or whatever under their belt first, just to get the foundational technique down first for understanding how to melt glass. And then
Exactly,
and then you can do whatever the fuck you want to do. But again, it takes a ton of practice. Watching you do your filicello, it's like, yeah, you've done them thousands of times, so you got this shit down to a science. The person that watches the video and attempts it the first time around, they may nail it the first time, but that second, third, and fourth time, it's going to look like shit,
Right.
And then maybe by number 20 or 50, it's going to look back to how the first one was. It's interesting.
Exactly.
And glass is
Yeah.
always like that. It's like one step forward, 20 steps backwards. It's,
All the time.
Yeah,
It's weird. It's weird like that.
it really is. So when you were first selling your work, I mean, obviously you're saying, you're selling your glass to the studio you're working at, but when you got out of that space, how'd you go about marketing and selling your glass?
Yeah. So I started selling glass on Instagram, basically at auction, and it wasn't really for the money at first. It was really just for like followers and like trying to gain some sort of foundation on Instagram, marketing myself. And everybody was kind of auctioning stuff, and at the same time, I was starting to make pendants for the first time, and the store I was working for wasn't going to buy those. So everything else I was working for, they a lot of this, stuff they'd buy, and a lot of my time was really spent on repairs and lessons where there's no product. So, like a lot of my time was spent on that. So like there wasn't a lot of product over the time. But the the products that I was making that were outside of the store ended up originally just being like my first filicellos. So those were really the first things I ever was selling outside of the store I was working for. And that was all really auctions. So, and that was like a building process where I'm going to talk about it a little bit actually in a Instagram tips and tricks type thing, hopefully on my podcast soon, but in like full depth. But a lot goes into that in learning how to build an auction page / just do auctions in general and find that following and selling glass that way. But then what that translated to was that I ended up actually selling selling glass and rigs that matched, that were my designs, that were my pendants. and I started selling to stores. And the stores were basically, I just emailed people. I just scattershot emails to people, and a lot of them were really, really nice. And a lot of them were willing to check out my glass and work with me. And a lot of it was just communication and luck, and producing something and having pictures.
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah, that's kind of how I started selling. Was I started with auctions, and then once I had a price scheme for my auctions to like price my glass out, then I was able to approach stores with a wholesale price. And then once I was able to do that, I found a couple stores willing to buy from me and continued some auctions. But then that got complicated because I couldn't allow my auctions to compete with stores.
Hmm.
So that got really complicated, and I started avoiding auctions. And nowadays, where there's been a lot of time in this and changing how I do things and growth and lots of different things, but now all of my auctions are things that you can't find in stores. So, there's no competition.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you're saying that, because that was part of my issue first off with auctions, because I do the same thing. Like for me, the auction is offering my tribe a chance to purchase my glass that's a pretty affordable rate, more so than buying it in a shop. But I also try to make sure that the price point was at least potentially at what the retail the shop was going to be. But a lot of times
Yeah.
it was maybe at wholesale, and I know a couple of my accounts were kind of pissed about it. So I had to go to a point like you're saying, like if I was going to auction something off, it had to be something that I wasn't selling to anybody else but through my auctions.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's conflict of interest in a sense. But I think too, like what you're saying, it's good if you have a new product that you're making and you want to get it out in the market and you want to test the market by running an auction, because it gives you kind of a chance to somewhat gauge what it's going to potentially retail for, or it might be under retail, but it still gives you the idea of where to kind of range your price for it, when it comes down to
Exactly.
wholesale.
No, it's great help, and it's also proof.
Yeah.
So most stores don't have anything to go off of except for your word. If you say something's worth $1,000 and it's gonna sell, why do they think that that's true other than your word? So you actually can have a reference and be like, well, I sold 3 of these things that are exactly like this. Looks like people want them, and it's sold for this much. So I want this much.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's really like a good way of going about it, but there's also the conflict of interest.
Mhm.
So, there's going to have to be some communication there, or stores are going to have to be, blind or understanding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So when you were doing your emailing, did you scour the Instagrams and just find contact information through the Instagrams and social media feeds to get their contacts?
Yeah,
that was
I,
redundant.
I actually just actually searched smoke or shop, like keywords,
Uh-huh.
into the search engine, and then DM'd stores. But also throughout time, I also have like followed stores and know of stores. Um, I also later on, like when I was first beginning, I was doing this stuff, but much later on, I started going to trade shows and doing other things like that. Which and at that point. Instagram, through Instagram, you end up being seen by people, and people know you, and you end up meeting them, and relationships are made over time, basically.
Yeah. Hell yeah. So you're doing your tutorial videos and what have you, and now you got your little podcast going on. Was that something that kind of just like grew out of a concept of what you're doing with your videos on your show?
I'm sorry.
It's just in terms of your like actually the idea for you doing your show, your podcast, the Double Blown Show. Like what was?
I kind of missed the question.
Oh yeah, I'm just asking like what sparked kind of the inspiration to
The
get
podcast
for the podcast? Yeah.
I kind of felt like Instagram. I only get like a short little caption, and it's not really like a. I felt like a podcast is a totally different platform to speak to people,
Mhm.
and to interact with the community. It's just a totally different platform to interact with the community that is, I can get in much more depth. People can write in, It's really it stemmed from because I am a huge fan of comedy, and I've been watching stand up since I was a child, and it's gone through this huge explosion. And there's so much stand up, and I'm there's so much to watch, and I've been watching so much. And not only that, but also the people that I like the most. Um, they have their own podcasts. It's a huge thing in their world is to have podcasts. It's a huge thing in pretty much every industry now.
Mm-hmm.
It's blown up exponentially, podcasts. So to say it's just them, it's but it's in their industry, stand up comedians. It has blown up, and I watch a lot of podcasts when it comes, stand up comedians podcasts, and just people that I respect and think highly of or enjoy watching, either whomever. But I guess just from watching other podcasts and seeing that other people can find platforms to talk to people, and not everybody is speaking nonsense. So or some people are, and it's really entertaining.
Right.
But either or, it's that there's free entertainment. There's free knowledge, free entertainment out there, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
So I wanted to jump in on that, and I thought, I really don't like, I'm building it. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing exactly and how to do it, but I've seen that it's a really cool way again to speak to people and or communicate with a large group of people.
Yeah, for sure.
So
are you going to basically keep your show on as a YouTube show, or are you going to be getting into more of the audio stuff as well, like this show, for instance? Because there's a difference in terms of like the genre per se of content. So like your YouTube
sure.
like your YouTube video is a YouTube broadcast, where like the podcast is more audio presentation on an app on like iTunes or Stitcher or
Exactly.
what have you.
Totally. I'm definitely going to switch it up, and it's going to grow, but for the most part, it probably is going to end up just staying for like a free YouTube show, because I'd like to keep the visual for the for the future, but it really it's pretty up in the air at the moment. So podcast is like really loosely used at the moment. But yeah, it's I definitely, like I said, it's just kind of up in the air. But I definitely do have plans to definitely upgrade my equipment and post it on other platforms. I'm trying not to expand the platforms much further than just free, non-monetized YouTube videos.
Hell yeah. Yeah, man, it's good because you can also upload your, you can capture just like the audio portion, and eventually then you can upload that to a host, and then you can have have a podcast.
I mean, it's just YouTube is literally free and unlimited.
Yeah, which is nice.
Like
for a content creator.
Like I tried using Spotify and stuff, and they were like, "You have 32 megabytes." It's like, that's literally 30. That's like 15 minutes of audio. Like, maybe. I don't know. It was something like that. It was something ridiculous. Like, because it's just meant so you can put on like two or three songs.
Yeah, exactly.
In a free account at least. And it's, I don't know. So I'm not going to monetize the videos either. So you have to worry with ads and stuff, because a lot of people are dealing with not getting paid by YouTube. So I'm really not worried. I've made 12 cents from YouTube, and they're not going to pay me because they have this like minimum you have to make. And even after that, I'm sure they charge you a fee to get the money, and it's kind of complicated. You have to make a lot of money, and the way that you get money is only if people like don't push skip on ads, and they watch the whole ad, and they have to spend over 15 seconds on it, and you also only get money if like they click on it. It's really like it doesn't make any sense to monetize your video, although I have monetized a couple of my videos. So I really would just like to just keep it free on YouTube, as but I could eventually do episodes though that are only going to be audio, because I'll travel and upgrade my equipment and try to just do audio shows. But you know, like I said, it's very up in the air.
Cool. Yeah, yeah.
Right now, it's like right now I kind of want to keep it to kind of fun. Like the last episode I just talked about my tendonitis, which is just kind of like unique. It's not like I'm gonna go in and teach. I might do an episode of like how to make a bubbler, but I don't really want to keep it completely on how to physically glass blow. But it's like I've taught a lot and I kind of really miss teaching, but that's not really where it's gonna be. Like it's what it's gonna be, at least. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just gonna be how-to videos, I guess.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So speaking of your tendonitis, like, because I deal with it myself, and after almost 19 years of doing this, it's just bound to happen. Arthritis and precarpal tunnel, all that shit, just from repetitive strain, injuries that you can potentially get down the road. I haven't seen that particular episode yet, and I definitely want to watch it. But yourself personally, like, how have you? Is it something new that you've been dealing with in terms of the tendonitis, or is it something that you've been dealing with for a while now?
no, it's been years. Progressively worse. Like I've gone through periods like I couldn't sleep for months. So much pain, like unbelievable amounts of pain. Like I've never had anything. I learned what chronic pain was. Like I really didn't understand the concept of chronic pain or the definition of chronic until I figured this out.
Mm-hmm.
Until I experienced this and had to talk to all the doctors I spoke to. I now get it. I now know what chronic pain is, and it's no, and it was something that I didn't quite understand, which was like the whole issue is that I didn't understand, and I was just doing worse and worse stuff for myself. I wasn't working out my arms the right way. I was assuming my glass blowing work was exercise for my arms and not just tearing it apart. I like the stretches I were doing were really counterproductive. That I just didn't know anything about it, and I also saw doctors, and they like wrongly diagnosed me and gave me like anti-steroidal inflammatory pills and stuff that like didn't really work but kind of worked. And like it was a long period of time of trying to figure out what exactly it was until I finally went and I saw a chiropractor and an osteopath that both said, yeah, you have chronic tendonitis in your biceps, like your right bicep for sure, like unbelievable, like chronic tendonitis, like
Crazy.
severe tendonitis in your bicep. I don't know what the other guys were saying, but you have severe tendonitis in your bicep, and and you also have like your tubulars are inflamed in your shoulder as well. Like it's and at that point it was spreading to the like upper my back, like really like the back of my shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
and spreading to other muscles and stuff. And yeah, I really wasn't, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know what was going on. And I finally talked to the right doctors, and I kind of figured out what was going on. I learned what tendonitis was. So ever since then, which was a couple months ago, in the episode I say I've been gaining weight to help with that. Because what you need to do is gain muscle mass to counteract what's going on with your muscles. So like what's happening is you're just overusing your muscles, and the key word of that is over.
Yeah.
You're overusing those muscles. So like you gotta gain muscle to counteract that. But on top of that, you also need to stretch. Stretching is unbelievably key, and the correct stretches are unbelievably key. And in my YouTube video, or my episode 5 of Double Blown, you'll see I show the stretches that I personally do and the stretches that I found that were the most helpful out of the ones that I was shown by the doctors.
Nice.
So I spent hundreds of dollars to figure out all of this, and I really hope that the stretches will help people. I actually got a really, really amazing email from somebody. They messaged me and like, told me they watched all my episodes, and, said that they deal with shoulder issues and that the stretches that I showed them really helped, and, wished me luck on my journey. And it was a really amazing email. So,
Yeah,
like,
it's the best in it
it's
when you get
great.
that response like that.
Right.
Yeah, it makes me feel.
So,
It makes you want to keep doing what you're doing with these shows too. Because I'm the same way. Man, I get at least every episode I get someone reaching out to me, and it's definitely humbling, and it makes me feel good. That even if you're
Exactly.
just helping
No,
one person out.
exactly. That's all I hope, just I hope that that helps somebody, because like I said, like I wish I had a teacher. Like I just wish I had knowledge ahead of time for things.
Hmm.
It's like in anything I learn, I'm like, wow, I wish I knew that. Like, and I want to scream it,
Yeah.
from the mountaintops. Like, hey guys, this is this. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
amazing. I know I think about it all the time, like looking back on my career, like what would have changed or where would I be now in a sense of my techniques if I had, taken a class here and there back then. Like I've taken classes recently, but the classes I've taken recently were more or less like showing me that I knew what I was doing. I picked up a couple of
yeah,
techniques, I cleaned my stuff up in certain areas, but it was more of just reinforcing that I already kind of had an idea what I was doing. But if I had those lessons 10 years ago, who knows, the difference. But also I may not be as I guess,
yeah, you might not be
the
exactly
as
who you are.
yeah, the level I'm at now.
It's Um, but like that's why, I made the Filicello video. It's like I spent so long making reticellos and filicellos that were subpar, and I wish I just had my video. And it's literally like, how many times you're like, how, I wish I could like send a letter to my, my younger self. It's like that's my letter to I hope other people that are, you know, trying to figure out something that I have already figured out. And like I do the same with anybody else that has figured out things that I haven't figured out, which is an exponential amount more than that video. It's
Yeah.
like so I just think that we all, that's why I'm doing it. It's just
Yeah.
you want to show people information.
Hell yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. So I want to ask you about your name. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's unique, man. So, like, do your parents have like a reason for the naming of you?
Yeah, so Takoda is a friend all in Lakota Cherokee.
Okay.
So it's Native American, and Madrona is actually a name that my father picked. So my father's Louis Madrona, and he's a doctor and author. He wrote Coyote Medicine, which was a bestseller in 10 years ago. So you can Google his name, but he changed his last name. His last name was actually Mel, which is my middle name, and it was his stepfather's last name, so that was his last name. But then he changed his last name, which changed all of our last names when my dad married my mom, and they had me, but Madrona is actually it's Madrona in Spanish. It would be midwife,
Huh.
but we're not Spanish, so
Right.
it's actually a tree that sheds its bark instead of its leaves, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it
So
is.
it's like the Madrona tree. So I guess my dad has some sort of story and why the Madrona tree is really close to him, but so that's why he changed his last name to Madrona, but also because of complications with his stepfather.
Yeah.
Just didn't want to have his last name. So that's long, long, long history ago. But so that's my name's Takoda Mel Madrona, and it is actually like my birth name. A lot of people think that it's like a glass blowing name. I knew somebody for like 3 years, and I was like, yeah, Takoda's my real name. It's like, wait, that's it took him 3 years to figure that out.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask because I'm always I had to because I was curious myself. I figured it was your real name, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's why I
No, a lot
wanted
of
to
people
ask.
think it's a glass blowing name, but and like even when they know me,
That's funny. Yeah, it's good shit. It's unique and it works for a glass name for an artist name too. It's definitely something that you don't necessarily forget.
Yeah. With the double A's, it sounds good. Takoda Madrona.
Yeah, yeah, it flows off the tongue nice.
Yeah.
So, kind of with your filicellos and the patterns that you're doing, and even like your images per se, you definitely have a tribal kind of style, and I guess that's what I'd call it. To your your pendants and stuff that you're auctioning off. Do you have like a specific inspiration that goes into your work, or that you kind of feel from, or do you free flow shit? Like what are you doing when you're coming up with your designs and your concepts?
I hate to be that guy just to say like it just comes to me.
No, but
But
that's a good
literally
answer.
I don't, when it comes to my filicellos and my disc flips and stuff, uh it's really just been a slow build. If I could say that,
Hmm.
like from the beginning, it was just two sets of lines that were crossing each other, and that became more and more sets of lines. And then it became filling in the spaces and creating these color patterns, and then the color patterns have just built off of each other. Uh, I would definitely probably say subconsciously, my house was filled with like stuff you'd find in New Mexico. Like old, like very um,
Like South.
Midwestern,
Yeah.
like
So.
Southwestern, like
Uh-huh.
Midwest, Southwestern, like art, like coyotes and that style type of art, but also like Native American art. Lots of Native American art, and so I would say definitely subconsciously, I've noticed that there's a lot of similarities to, let's say, like beadwork that you'd see, those intricate patterns
Yeah, yeah.
but interestingly enough, you don't actually see the filicello or the reticello or that sacred geometry pattern that you commonly see in other cultures. You don't actually see that very often in Native American cultures, so there isn't that direct connection. But I would probably say subconsciously the color patterns are probably somewhat related to some sort of reference to that sort of past, or part of my life or part of my past.
Yeah, because I mean that's what I see when I see your work, which is also why I wanted to ask you about your name, because it's kind of, to me, it kind of coincides with your style and your flavor, what you're doing, kind of, with your
Yeah, it's
name.
got
Yeah,
like a very Native American type of feel,
yeah,
with the diamonds all intertwining with each other.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it definitely reminds me a lot of Native American beadwork.
Yeah, because I mean, you even look at like dream catchers and stuff, and the dream catchers, in a sense, are,
Yeah, I
very.
mean, right there. I mean, a dream catcher is, what am I saying? That pattern doesn't show up. I guess I was thinking beadwork. That pattern doesn't show up in beadwork, but
Right.
obviously it doesn't. But that pattern is right there. It shows up in every single culture there is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know. So I always thought I always wanted to make those, like all my since I started making filicellos, I always wanted to do dream catcher pendants, but I could never make the feathers the way I wanted them.
Hmm.
Like I just couldn't get it the way I wanted, so I just always dropped it. And maybe one day I'll do it. But also I've seen people do it. There is another, there's one or two artists that actually make those. So, that comes into, I don't want to replicate that, although it would be my own thing.
Yeah, exactly. I know one way I've done feathers before like that is basically just laying down some color, in like a teardrop shape, and then using my butter knife to kind of symmetrically cut it down the middle, like really press it in deep, so it almost presses the color away from itself and exposes the clear underneath, in a sense, and then just going down and cutting the grooves at angles, as like a feather kind of has. Same kind of way, like trying to press through that color as much as you can to bring the clear through, in a sense. So when you look at it from the other
I like
side,
that.
you know what I mean? Kind of, and then you melt it all in, and it has that separation in between each little in a groove. It doesn't really have a straight line, but it has kind of a feathery kind of look to it. Just to share that with you. One little way I've done it before.
Yeah, yeah. I used to make leaves all the time, and that was my issue, is that they always just looked like leaves.
Hmm.
I'd always carve down the center, and then I do the edging leaf veins and things like that. And whenever I make a feather, it always just looked too much like my leaves,
Yeah.
and I couldn't. It was like a personal thing,
Hmm.
I'm sure other people would look like. I made a feather once, and I ended up giving it away as a pendant because and they were like, "This is awesome. Like, why wouldn't you?" And I'm like, "It's not right. It's not the way I want it to be."
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's my problem with it.
Yeah.
But I like that if layering, and then if you press hard enough, you'll get that clear to run through, and that would really help. That would make it look more feathery to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna give that a shot.
Hell yeah. Hopefully that works for you,
It's
dude.
also about making them small enough for the pendant,
Yeah, and that's the
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
because it's got to be an accent to the pendant, so
Hmm.
it can't like be the size of a pendant, which is annoying,
Yeah.
which makes the carving all that more, difficult.
Yeah, totally. Especially because you're working backwards too.
Yeah, I'm thinking like millies, trying to
Yeah.
develop some sort of millie, or like a flat cane. If I could figure something out that I could, pull down and make small, But
That's the fun
we'll
thing
see.
about glass, man. We can sit here and talk about making feathers all night long and eventually come up with somebody.
Endless
Yeah,
options.
right. It's fucking cool and frustrating. Because like like at work, someone's like, I get like the whole, "You're an artist, have fun with it." I'm like, no, I need parameters, please.
Yes. Oh my God. Don't have to tell me.
Yeah, God.
Like, it's just like it's like you get to do whatever you want, and I'm like, yeah, but sometimes it feels good to like have something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what am I aiming for right now?
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm asked a lot, like when it comes to production, like people always ask me, like how many, like say when I'm in the hot shop making ornaments, like, well, how many are you making a day? And I'm like, well, sometimes 20 to 25. And they're like, well, doesn't that get boring? I'm like, no, I love opening the kiln and seeing a full kiln. But then there's days where I like opening the kiln and just seeing one big fucking piece in there. It just depends on what my
Yeah.
mood for that day is.
Yeah, totally.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, I think right now would be a good time for us to take a quick break and thank our sponsors here. And then we'll come back and it'll be time for us to crash the kiln. This segment of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Zen Dude Fitness. Lose 10 pounds this month by joining the Zen Dude Fitness 4-week jump rope fat loss challenge. Brandon and Dan will take you on a guided journey towards becoming the best you. Get fit, have fun, and find new ways to eat healthy while still enjoying the sweeter side of life. Just takes 20 to 30 minutes a day and no gym required. For more info and to sign up for the free 4-week challenge, go to wiseguymedia.com/ZenDudeFitness. That's wiseguymedia.com/ZenDudeFitness. All right, we're back. So, yeah, man, the Crash and Killing round consists of 7 questions. You can give me a 30 to 60 second answer on them, or you can also expound upon them as we always do. And the first question I always like to ask, if there's any living glass artist out there that you haven't worked with yet, who is it and why?
Any living glass artist I have not worked with
Yeah, and you want to.
and would like to. That's hard.
Mm-hmm. That's why I asked first.
Yes. I will try to think of this quickly. I mean, I haven't personally worked with Yushin, and like I've seen him work, so I don't know if that like is working with him, like collaborating / actually working in the same studio, or like watching him work.
No, like physically being there.
Okay, like physically being like working with the individual. I mean, Yushin and I like. I would like to, I guess, work with Yushin because of, one, the popularity, but two, because I feel like what he has to offer me could really help in what I do more specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe WJC too would be the same kind of premise,
Mm-hmm.
Like where they could be really helpful and very specifically helpful for what I do. But as far as and that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, coil condenser, I haven't gone to work with, and I know that he's got a lot of information to give. I mean, just could, I've seen his work, and I know that I know the school he's come from, and I've seen his development. I know how much time he spends traveling to different places, learning from places. I mean, I think that he would have some knowledge to give me, and I'm very interested in the knowledge that I know that he has.
Yeah, he's a great teacher. He's actually one of the few classes I've taken was with him.
Yeah, I haven't taken a lesson with him at all. I mean, I've met him a couple times, but he's a great guy, so I would say maybe him, but there are, there's just so many. It's really hard. I mean, I can't think of his name for some reason, but he makes animal balloons that are weighted down by a metal weight.
Oh yeah. God, it's gonna drive me fucking crazy. I know his name too.
But that's all sculptural work, where like it would be nice to see him, but everybody's different with sculptural work, but it's all pretty much, just sculpting. It's like it would be nice to watch him work. But he's an amazing artist, an amazing market. He's like really an incredible artist. So like he would be great, be fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow, I should have thought of that. I mean, this is kind of like who's your favorite artist a little bit. And but I mean, like I said, like WJC, Yushin, people like that would probably be really specifically helpful to me. I really admire the artist that makes the animals that are held down by a metal weight. Those are common pieces he makes. He's an incredible artist. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm actually trying to
I know,
trying to
I
find
know,
real quick
right? Like
because
it's
yeah,
like I totally know it, but I don't.
yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm terrible with names
Oh,
too.
Hoops. Hoops is awesome. I would love to work with Hoops. I choose Hoops.
Okay, he's a badass too.
He's cool. I think yeah, maybe Hoobs. There's definitely a handful of guys out there that I would like kill to work with, but and like know what they know. But Hoobs is killer. I would love to learn from Hoobs. Yeah, I'll go with him.
Hell yeah,
Comfortable with that answer.
awesome. So, what are your top 5 favorite colors in glass?
My teacher Dylan Davis said that cobalt is the Cadillac of glass, and that was well before we had any of the glass that we use today.
Yeah,
But I will always hold strong and say that cobalt is an amazing color and it is extremely stable and it is pretty in all different levels. But Atomic Blue Stardust is really cool. It's sparkly and blue. Good batch, you know. I really like that color. Illuminati is always like fun. I'm always so up and down with Illuminati. Sometimes I'm like and then sometimes I'm like this is really really cool. So does that go on the list of top five? I think it goes in the mentionables.
okay.
It's and I mean personally, I use all cadmium colors when I do flips. So I could just name off all the red, orange, yellow cadmium colors that I use the most.
Hmm.
Where right now I'm using poppy, so you could say poppy for my red. I like yellow crayon or canary. Canary, I like yellow crayon more than canary. So yellow crayon, orange crayon, and poppy would be what I normally use for my cadmiums, and those definitely are my favorites because it's what I use the most. I mean they definitely wouldn't be like my favorite to make tubing out of. So you could throw those on Atomic Blue Stardust, and it's hard. I mean, slime has always been a really good. Like I always like slime, but it's really not definitely not my favorite. I can't put that up there. It's hard. I really like the transparent orange colors, like goldfish and stuff like that. I actually really like them, but they're hard. They're like kind of bubbly. Like they're hard to work, kind of like cadmiums, which make them not as fun to work. And they're not sparkly like Atomic Blue Stardust. Again, difficult questions. Good questions. Cobalt. Um, Atomic Blue Stardust, and the other three that I gave:
Cool.
Poppy, Yellow Crayon, and Orange Crayon. I'll throw those five up.
Hell yeah.
I mean, definitely there's so many others amazing, but right now those are great. Those are some of the ones that I use.
Hell yeah. So, what's your worst injury in the studio? If I can spit it out.
I cut my hand really severely, but I was just breaking a tube of glass, so I don't know if that counts.
Yep.
I dropped a can on my arm that was hot, and it rolled down my whole arm. But that was like it was moving so fast it didn't bubble or boil.
Mm.
So I'd say like maybe some of the inch sized burns that I've gotten. Like I had my the whole tip of my thumb was once one big blister, so that was pretty bad. And then just like the severe cut that I mentioned, probably the worst of it. As far as like really severe thing, like real damage. There's 1,000 little things, 1,000 little cuts, 1,000 little burns.
Hmm.
I find melted pieces in my shoe sometimes, like um, glass in the eye. I've actually like cracked glass before, at the tip off of something, and it went right in my eye, and I had to get that out. But yeah, I think yeah, I don't think I really damaged myself. As come to think of it, I always think that I must have hurt myself really badly doing this, but come to think of it, I don't think any like really severe things I've really hurt myself. I haven't really hurt myself too badly doing much anything. I broke my foot in Amsterdam once.
Jesus.
That was about it. I've never even broken a bone other than that. Oh, my hand. I broke my hand once, but yeah, I would say I have a pretty gnarly scar on my hand from cutting it on the tube that I broke, and just a couple burns, you know,
Yeah.
in inch-sized boils.
So I guess mainly you're just, in terms of just injury wise, you're just dealing with your tendonitis.
Yeah, yeah, really, just the tendonitis is like, you know, that would be it. I
Yeah.
guess that would be the biggest injury that I've faced from glass blowing for sure. I just wouldn't classify it as an injury almost.
Hell yeah. So when you're in the shop, do you watch TV, listen to the radio, or do you do both?
Podcasts and my headphones. I always worked with headphones in the studio that I worked in because it was kind of loud. And now I work in my own studio, and I can, obviously not use headphones, but it's kind of like what I prefer because it cancels out all other noise, and it just lets me really tune in. And that's my own personal thing. But yeah, just headphones and podcast or music. More commonly podcasts more recently.
Hell yeah.
But I used to just listen to endless music and just zone out.
Nice. Do you have any glass blowing themed tattoos?
Glass blowing tattoos? No, I don't. I have two tattoos. I have an ankh on my arm, and I have your name tattooed on my ass. And I got them both when I was 14. So I did not get any more after that. So no, I don't have any glass blowing tattoos. But interestingly enough, I definitely have thought about it.
Hell yeah.
I don't know a glass blower that hasn't.
Yeah, exactly. So final question is, what are your top 5 favorite tools besides your
Top
torch?
5 favorite
Yeah, besides
tools.
your torch and your glasses.
Well, I always say, like you need a bowl push if you're gonna make pipes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so much of a pipe maker anymore, so I don't really use a bowl push. But when I was learning, you had to have a bowl push because you didn't not make pipes. So so bowl push, I'll always say that always have tweezers because I'm always picking up things. But I actually use pliers. So I use like really heavy duty pliers, and I've had the same pair since like when I was 16 and took my lessons.
Nice.
So I have a trusty pair of pliers. That's number one. Bowl push, number two. Tweezers, tungsten, paddle, graphite paddle. And I'm going to replace the bowl push with a reamer. Did I say reamer already?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm going to replace the bowl push with a reamer.
Okay, cool. Hell yeah. Yeah, and those are all good for pendants. I mean, all kind of stuff you can do with those tools.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think that's good. Yeah, I don't use I don't use a lot of tools, but I was gonna say those things that they're like tweezers but backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess
Can't
they call
think
them.
of what they're called.
I think they're just reverse tweezers. I call them.
No, yeah, but they're the ones that like they purposely open up and they like ream things out perfectly. They're a very specific tool and they're very expensive.
Kind of
I'm
like
sorry, I'm
Jacks.
blanking on that. Jacks, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, there
That's
you go.
exactly what I'm thinking of. Jacks.
Yeah, they are pricey,
They're
aren't
not
they?
all extremely expensive, but they can be an expensive tool.
Yeah, especially for the small ones. I've noticed
Yeah.
they're not cheap. So
Yeah, I don't own a pair. I never learned to like use them. I don't have the muscle memory for it.
You know what I started using is the bent neck tungsten tweezers, and the very tip of it, like the end of the tweezers are bent, and they have little tungsten picks in them, and they're rounded off on one edge, and then the very tip of it is round on one edge, and then the inside of the tip is flat. So you can pinch things flat, or you can go into something and then they spring open, and because it's tungsten, it works great for doing flares, for tubing, for doing reamering out your bails on your pendants, like all that shit.
Killer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good little tool.
I have these weird little tweezers that like the tips of them are circular, and but then like are pointed, so almost like two tungstens, but it's not tungsten metal.
Okay.
So it's kind of, but it's just kind of like tweezers that are like that. I never really use them, but they're they're almost like really tiny jacks. Yeah, it's really weird. They're like, like almost like tweeze your eyebrows sized tweezers, but they're jacks.
Interesting.
It's like very strange, and they're metal, so they stick to the glass.
Yeah.
So you gotta wax them up.
Yeah, little beeswax. Yeah. Hell yeah, dude. Well, it's been fun chatting with you and sharing your stories and your journeys and all the new things and projects you got going on nowadays. It's fun to have somebody else on here that's in the same kind of space for education and not just showing technique, but talking life and talking things outside of the studio in a sense, like you're doing your episode on tendonitis. Like those things are so important to talk about, especially when it comes to stretching properly. So definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing everything, man. It's been a pleasure to have you on here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Hell yeah. Well, before we let you go here, if you want to give us a parting piece of advice, and then also where we can find you out there in the world of cyberspace.
Parting piece of advice would be try not to stress because things break, and find a teacher because it will exponentially help your growth.
Hell yeah, so true. And then where can we find you out there in the webs?
You can find me on Instagram at takoda.madrona. And you can, my website currently is down, but will be up soon, and that's just Takoda Madrona at www.takodamadrona.com. But then, most importantly, you can find me on YouTube as well, just by searching my name, Takoda Madrona, and find my channel for my podcast, Double Blown. Yeah.
Hell yeah, and I love the name.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good shit. So, yeah, man, so hang on real quick. I'll say goodbye off the air here with you. So, but yeah, I hope you all enjoyed our interview and chit-chat here with Takoda. Definitely go check out his podcast or his YouTube channel going on. It's, the more he does, the better they're going to get. And as anything else, as it goes in glass and life in general, just got to keep on doing it. And he's taking the step here to just put them out there. And they're, again, dude, I've been enjoying them myself. So it's... You're doing a good thing out there, and hope you all enjoy it. Go check him out. Subscribe to his channel. It's Double Blown. Just search that in the search engine or look his name up as well. And I'll have all the links in the show notes for you guys to check out as well. And until next time, happy melting. Stay safe out there. And oh, you know what, dude? Actually, before we let you go, I'm kind of getting off topic here. One thing we didn't get to discuss was how the fuck you can blow glass when it's 25 degrees below zero outside.
Yep.
Living here in Florida where it's, right now it's pretty chilly out, but we're spoiled in a sense down here. And I know people out in California, et cetera. But, yeah, any advice or tips that you have for those that are out there freezing their balls off in their studios right now?
There's tons of ways to keep yourself warm if you're blowing glass in the cold, from heating mats. It really, really will help to get a mat that is heated, especially if you're working on a floor that is cold. I don't use a heated mat, but I know someone who does use a heated mat, and I've used it, and it helps wonders. But also, if you are working on a cold floor, raise your floor. Take some insulation, put a layer of insulation down, put a layer of plywood down, put your normal foot mat on top. Get off of that cold ground. It's not good for you. It's really, really not good for your feet too. It does soak through your shoes and your feet. When your feet are cold and your muscles are cold, it is like they're worn down. So it's like, walking a couple steps is walking a mile. It really destroys your feet, and you won't notice until it's too late. And you can actually really, really hurt your feet. If you added humidity to that, you would then have a trench foot, which is what they got in World War One. So that's kind of, why they got so bruised and awful was also the cold wearing them down. So try to get your feet off that cold if you have a cold ground. Besides the actual cold ground itself and getting yourself nice feet mats, there are propane heaters. You can connect directly up to the same propane that you're running, although those do burn out propane really, really, really quickly. But so that's your option if you don't have extra electricity to burn. I know a lot of people are in their garages. They don't have extra electricity. They're already popping their breakers. So one, I'd recommend, if you're popping your breakers, like I mentioned, like really try to work out your electrical system. But people are really already overdoing their electrical system. So if you don't have more energy to spare, like as far as electricity, go with gas. It's worth it. It's worth it to keep yourself hot, keep yourself warm, and it is not an unbelievable expense. But they're very affordable too. But space heaters, any type of space heater will help, a lot. And also having a really, you could theoretically have your intake, you need intake to your room where you are. You need an intake and an outtake. So your intake, you can have heated air. It's theoretically possible to heat the air that's coming in from, figuring out your intake. So, or, things like that. So all those are possible, from electric heaters to gas heaters to, but also I've also have heard that you can lead. There's some sort of way. I don't have the right information, but somebody was using their hood. I can't imagine how it's safe, but I guess they were pumping the hot air from their hood through a series of vent ducts, and then like filtering it so that like it would lead the hot air back into the room and then filter back out before it would like totally leave the room or something like that. So they would like fill the room with this like vent. It's unbelievable. But there's ways to keep your room hot, basically. So yeah, propane heaters, making sure you stay off the cold ground, and if you have the electricity, use it. Get a nice space heater. Personally, I don't use the oil ones. The oil space heaters, they cost a lot of electricity for one, and it doesn't seem like an efficient way to heat anything, just to have a hot block there. So I have these, like, you can buy them for like $150 at the grocery store where I live, or like Rite Aid, or a pharmacy, or Walmart, but they look like these little wooden boxes, and it's just an up and down switch on it, but they look like little wooden boxes. But what it is it's a quartz heated, like fan operated heater. So what it is, it's a coil inside of it that's made of quartz, heated up. It's very energy efficient, and then it blasts a fan through it, bringing filtered air, because it filters the air while it pumps, filtered hot air through it. So it just filters the air through the quartz element and heats the air itself. It registers how hot the room is, so that once the room reaches pinnacle temperature, it shuts itself off, waits until the room drops temperature, and turns itself back on. It's an extremely efficient machine, and it's not that expensive, and in comparison to like an oil heated thing, which is not efficient. So yeah,
Cool.
that I would recommend quartz heated.
Hell yeah. Good. I'm glad we covered that real quick. I almost forgot it.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that being said, take that advice and keep your feet warm for sure. And so until next time, go check us out on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, any kind of podcast catcher out there. Also go to wiseguymedia.com / this would be 135, 38. I don't know where the fuck we are. I've got so many damn episodes. 180. No, it's 188. That's what we're going to be on. Jesus, my brain's fried. So until next time, we'll talk to you guys soon. Stay wise, and we'll talk to you next time. Take it easy. See you. Hey, well, I hope you enjoyed this little interview and chit chat with Takoda and myself. It was a lot of fun. We definitely covered a lot of bases, as always, as we do on the show, which I love to do. And I want to cover again. This is only the second time doing this, kind of new for me. So I haven't really taken many notes. I just kind of like to just listen to the interview and be in the time, be in what am I looking for? In the moment. It's been a long talk, so I'm a little tired here. But yeah, to be in the moment. And anyways, so he's definitely inspiring. His name, Takoda Madrona, is his real name, which is cool to hear in the story and the origins of that. I almost forgot to ask him about the cold weather situation, so I'm glad I remembered at the very end there. So I hope you caught that part. If you're listening to this, you obviously caught the end part there where we talked about it. But part of really what I found interesting with his journey was starting off with a couple quick lessons, going through basically a systematic approach through taking lessons, and then being hired to do production, and then hired to teach. And part of what I've always found myself is, even early on, I wanted to teach how to do this work. And even though I wasn't that good early on, I still knew some stuff to get started based on what I was taught. And if you have a really, really good basic foundation from the early ons in your career, it gives you the ability to share those type of techniques, whether it's like when I had Chris Piazza on, and he talked about when he first started, he had to make a jar of marbles, and that was his first introduction into the torch, different things like that. And with Takoda, doing a progressive lesson, kind of crash course in a sense, to where he has got to where he was at the end of his lessons, going through the spoons and the oneies and just understanding the medium, was very interesting. But I think he was, what was interesting was that when he got into the process to teach, he was able to sit back and then kind of break down the way he was taught, and then redo the lesson per se to help those that are going to be coming in to learn, make it a little easier for them, and also more effective and efficient, which I think is definitely super important. And everybody has their own way of learning and teaching as well, but definitely appreciate him talking about that and what he was saying, and the idea of just taking your time and learning and being exposed to lots and lots of different techniques. Like myself, over 19 years, I've been exposed to so many different techniques. And then there were specific ones that stood out to me, and for him as well, there were specific things in his career that stood out to him, hence why he now does a lot of filicello and awesome pattern line work and pendants and what have you, and disc flips and stuff. And it was interesting that he definitely didn't necessarily have inspiration per se for his work. It was mostly subconscious. But then when we talked about it, he did kind of realize that it does have this Southwestern kind of sacred geometry kind of look to it. And I find it fascinating as artists, when we try to dig up, different things for inspiration, a lot of times it just comes up out of us, things that maybe as a child you're interested in, or even as an adult, maybe you won't necessarily translate into glass, but it was still some kind of theme that inspired you. And he obviously has an underlying kind of inspiration with Native American culture, but somewhat subconsciously that wasn't aware that was what was going into his work. So I thought it was really, really interesting and fun. Also talking about his YouTube channel and, the concept and ideas of just making something and putting it out there, not worried about the feedback, not worried about how bad or good it is, but just starting and then continuing at it and continuing to master whatever it is that it is. We talk a lot about on here about the 10,000 hour mastering, and how I feel with glass, it's like 10,000 hours of technique to really master the techniques. And that goes with anything really, especially when it comes to creating content and doing shows like this one. This show's evolved so much over the last 4 seasons, even timing wise, where I was launching the seasons in, I think it was in June, which was when the show first initially launched. But now I'm just starting the seasons off at the beginning of the year. Just to me, it makes more sense on a calendar and cyclical kind of content. But yeah, so that being said, so when you're early on in glass or trying something new, don't be afraid to try something new. Even if it's, I'm not saying jump right into recyclers, but what I'm saying is as you progress in your techniques and you learn things, don't be afraid to push it as far as you can to the breaking point even. Because once you get to that point of the breaking point, you can step back a little bit and figure out what it was you did wrong, and then try to replicate everything you did up until the point of fucking it up, in a sense, and then figure out what you did to make the mistake, and then not make that mistake again. I know a lot of stuff when I'm doing sculptural work, when it comes to production, especially when I'm doing characters at work. A lot of times, I'll make the same piece 5 times in a row the same exact way, and I still get the same result that I don't like. I'm not sure what's going wrong with it, but I go through it 5 or 6 times just to see which step in the process is the one that I should not be doing or I should be changing. And I always find that it helps by really determining at what point in the process is the issue happening. Whether it's something that where you're adding glass that's, an area's too cold or it just shouldn't be added there, whatever. There's lots of things I can talk about in this thing, but you probably understand what I'm getting at here. So yeah, just that was kind of my biggest takeaway was the idea of there's a philosophical quote that I use a lot where it's if you're not embarrassed by the first product that you released, you waited too long. Be embarrassed by it. That first spoon, I'm not saying run around and take your first spoons and go to all the shops and think you're the best glass blower on earth, but be humble about it and take your first pieces and go around and try to sell them, but don't sell them for first quality. Say, hey, these are my beginner, studio, newbie, apprentice pieces per se, and these are not worth the top dollar pieces, but these are what I'm doing. And next time you go to that shop, you'll bring in better pieces and you'll get more dollar for it because it's a better quality, better look, just from the practice and the process of routine and repeating it and really fine tuning and learning your medium. So I don't know, it's kind of what I want to talk about. And then again, covering the cold weather stuff, it is definitely taking care of your feet in the wintertime is ideal. I know here in Florida, a couple of years ago, it was about 10 years ago, we had a really bad winter. And that week, the biggest issue I dealt with was my feet being cold. No matter how many pairs of socks I wore, just not thinking about standing on concrete, and it really, not only is pushing cold into my feet, but also removing the heat in a sense from my shoes. Even it's weird how it works, and the cold air blowing, etc. So just a lot of things to think about, and then to remember when you're working in the cold weather, you might be sweating and don't realize it because it's cold and it's dry and that sweat is going away. It's like working out in the desert. So make sure you're staying hydrated as well, and keeping your lips from getting chapped and your skin lubed up and not getting dried out, especially your face and things that are exposed to the heat, that kind of stuff when it comes to the cold weather. One of my students in my class was telling me he was having a problem getting his kiln to turn on because his pyrometer wasn't reading. It was so cold. It wasn't, his infinity switch wasn't clicking on, so he had to get a hot blob of glass and just put it into his kiln, so it would warm up the inside area. Instead of using a lighter to heat it up, he had to just go in there with a hot wad of 15 mil or whatever he used, and that heat helped to warm up the thermocoupler, which then was able to then get a signal to his kiln to then turn on, basically. It's kind of crazy that it was that cold, but some little things you got to do. So, wear extra socks, get a heated mat if you have one. Takoda mentioned talking about getting even like a pallet you can get with a piece of plywood on there to get yourself up off the concrete. It'll elevate you a little bit higher than you're probably used to working at your bench. You can always build a little box to put your torch on to elevate your torch if you need to. Propane heaters, little things like that. He talked about at the very end about someone he had saw that was basically recycling their hot air and pumping it back into their shop, which I don't recommend that. Only because it's just the filtration. I don't really care how well you filter it out. If you can't check it to see how pure that air coming in is, then I wouldn't recommend doing it at all. You can deal with carbon monoxide and other particles and weird stuff. But yeah, so stay warm, stay layered, stay safe, stay hydrated, and stay lubed up so you don't get all chapped up and dried out and all that good stuff. So until next time, I'm going to let you go here so I stop rambling. And thanks again for tuning in and listening to this all the way to the very end. Don't forget to go to mountainglass.com, check out all their sales going on, especially their January sale right now, and their Get It Quick so you get every week. If you have not yet subscribed to their newsletter, just go to mountainglass.com and sign up for their newsletter, and they'll give you insights every week onto all their new sales going on. And so looking forward to the next episode I'll be sharing with you guys coming up. But until this, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Takoda Madrona. Again, go check out his YouTube channel, his Instagram pages, and everything. And I believe now he has an Instagram page for his Double Blown show. I believe it's just Double Blown Podcast, at Double Blown Podcast. And I'll have that link in the show notes for you too. So you guys go check it out. Until next time, love you so much. Talk to you soon. Take care. Love you. Bye-bye. This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by The Flow magazine. Since its inception, the focus of The Flow has been to provide a bond among members of the lampworking community. In every issue, you can enjoy great content with the hottest artists and cutting-edge techniques using the latest industry products. These features, along with a continuation of our Women in Glass edition, Glasscraft Emerging Artist Awards, inspiring gallery showcases, dynamic general interest articles, as well as health and safety information, make The Flow the leading international lampworking journal. For more information or to subscribe to The Flow, go to theflowmagazine.com. That's theflowmagazine.com.
You're listening to the Wise Guy Radio